Hey guys, it's Izzy here, and today we are going to be doing my August wrap-up. It seems like we just filmed my TBR, but here we are, the last week of the month, doing the wrap-up. We had some DNFs this month, we've had some 5 stars this month. It's been a wild ride. Let's get into it. The first book I'm going to talk about today is Straight into Darkness by Faye Kellerman. This ended up being a DNF for me. I got to, I think, 59%, 69%, somewhere in that ballpark. This was too German for one, which that's my fault for being ignorant. I just did not really understand anything that was happening, and I just wasn't enjoying it. I didn't care about the mystery involved. And it is a quite big book, and I just did not want to waste my time reading it. I took 5 days reading it, and I just didn't want to give it any more of my time. So it went in my DNF pile to be unhauled at the end of the year. Next, we have a carryover from July. This was a mood read, and that is Lucas on the Line by Sui Davies. That's really little. They need to put his name bigger, but this was the 5th book in the Stranger Things universe. The characters did not have the same chemistry they had on the show, so that was the downside here, but I feel like that'd be something hard to replicate on page. Characters were all very angsty, but what can you expect from a bunch of 14-year-olds in a friend group with one another in their freshman year of high school? There's going to be a lot of angst. I always love the setting in the Stranger Things book as it just expands the world of Hawkins so much more. The writing was basic, but you have to remember this is young adult, so I'm not in the right demographic for it. Another thing is that the books add so much more plot to the show as we see the show from different perspectives, and even months and days that were not included in the show. This just adds so much more. The readers get that in-between time that show watchers won't be able to get unless they pick up the books. I enjoyed the book, and it was a really realistic installment to the Stranger Things universe. Let's get back to the TBR. So my fantasy pick of the month was The Candle and the Flame by Nafisa Azad. So this is a young adult fantasy novel. Like the majority of young adult fantasy novels, characters started out flat and just got more annoying and annoying and annoying as the story went on. Bavia was my favorite character, but by the last chapter, I couldn't stand her. The main character, Fatima, was fine at the start of the story, and towards the end of part 1 of the book, I was even starting to like her. But part 2 comes along and destroys all the development that happened to that character. She just becomes somebody completely new and different, and I didn't like that. Speaking of, I just feel like that was such a waste. Like, all that character development was just a waste and went down the drain, to be honest with y'all. The description of this book makes it seem like it takes place in our world, as it mentions Islam, Judaism, and the Silk Road. But no, this is a Middle Eastern inspired fantasy, inspired being the big word there. I do feel like this needed more world building because I was honestly confused of where we were, as I wasn't sure if we were in the real world or not. And this is a standalone, so it's not like we're going to get more world building in other books. The writing was the best part. Azad is great at descriptions. Lesser areas improve. She could become a great storyteller. This is a debut novel after all, so we can't judge it too harshly. That felt similar to other stories in the genre, that being a magical war happening in another plane of existence. That war is bleeding into our world where all the humans are. Chosen one girl who's gonna has some kind of secret powers and be able to save the day. Isn't that the plot of Stranger Things too, now that I think about it? Such a common trope, the chosen one. I have a 5-star now, a new favorite. This is a book that I was so scared to go into just because the hype around this author, but I had heard a lot of people who didn't like her previous books loved this one. So I'm still going to give her other books a chance, as I did really enjoy this one, but it lived up to the hype, and that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry, and this was a mood read for me. Also, is the best romance of the year for me. The characters had so much depth that I was rooting for both of them, and we only got the perspective of one of them, but both of them had so much development, male and female. Not go wrong with the New York City or North Carolina setting. I love them both. Writing was typical for a romance novel, so nothing out of the ballpark. It had all my favorite tropes, family values, enemies to lovers, and all the small town feels. Do not let the hype fool you. This one is definitely worth it. I do have my romance pick from my TBR, but I did read it on the Kindle app, so I'm just going to insert a picture here, but that is Happy Hour. These are by far the worst characters that I've ever read from. Like, it was insane, guys. The female protagonist was just so angry and full of hate with violent thoughts and actions. I don't know if she was supposed to be likable, but if you're gonna be like that, you're absolutely not likable. I'm not going to like you. 22-year-old male protagonist acts like a 5-year-old. He literally flipped over a table in the middle of Cracker Barrel. We're walking red flags, so I guess that makes them perfect for each other. There's not a lot to say about the setting for this one. 22, but they met when they were 11 in 1992, but then there's references to like pop culture things from 2008, so I'm really confused because you would think this would take place in like 2002 or the early 2000s, but I guess not. I don't know what was going on at the time. Maybe they're time traveling, who knows with this one. Writing was typical for the genre. I did spot a few grammar areas like lack of commas and just different punctuational things, but to me that's not really a huge deal, but I can see how that can drive other people up a wall. There was a lot of swearing that wasn't dialogue, and I didn't find that necessary in the slightest. There did throw in the male's point of view at 59% of the way into the novel, and I just feel like that's random, and if he was gonna have a point of view in it, I felt like it should have been from the get-go and not over halfway into the story. By the description on the back of the book, this seemed like something that I would actually really enjoy, as it involves around NASCAR and again a North Carolina setting. Out, you have to suspend your disbelief a lot if you are a fan of NASCAR and know a lot about the sport, because there were some things here that were just kind of unrealistic, to be honest with y'all. After all, we do have to remember that this was fiction. I have another romance mood read, and that is Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. I did this as a buddy read with my friend Erica, so that was fun to do a buddy read for the first time in forever, but I sped read it and I feel kind of bad about it now because I read this like really fast and she's still reading it, so definitely I need to improve my etiquette for buddy reads, and maybe we should do like a longer book. I don't know, but yeah, I sped it sped through it, so that should say a lot. These characters, they acted like the adults that they are intelligent and talk out their feelings and don't just do petty actions to one another like you see in a lot of romance books, especially the last one. It's so rare for characters to act their age and not just act like 17-year-olds, so to see them acting like they're in their 30s and all was super nice. Go between Los Angeles and small town Montana here, so if you like big city romance and small town romance, then you should pick up this one because you get vibes of both. Most well-written romance book that I've read this year, maybe ever, but I'm just going to say this year because I don't want to put too much on it. Immersive and filled with metaphors and other literary devices, so I can't wait to see what else this author writes. However, at times it did get repetitive with bits of dialogue. I got confused with some of the time jumps. It did say when there was a time jump, but there wasn't a huge differentiation between the two time periods that we're in, which is 2006 and then 2016. Scared that the added bits that are like articles and blog posts would take away from the story, but they actually didn't. It really adds on to the mentality that these characters have by what the media is saying about them, with Gabe being a famous actor, like he's James Bond, all of that. And then the female character, Chani, who is a reporter, and people are saying she's like slept her way to the top and all that kind of thing. It really shows the sexism that is in Hollywood and in American media. Really dives into how that lifestyle can impact a person's mental health. Really interesting topics were put on page here, and romance authors should take note on what Alyssa Sussman did with Funny You Should Ask. We have my historical fiction pick of the month, and that is Mrs. Everything by Jennifer Weiner. Really, really enjoyed this one. Her work in its finest form here. Bethy was the more relatable character for me, but I started to like her less and less as the story went on. On the other hand, Jo's story was like nothing I've ever read before. Bethy has that flower child story that we see in a lot of fiction nowadays, but Jo's was something different, as she is a lesbian woman in a relationship with a man and just hiding who she really is from the world and having to come to terms with that and come to terms with who she is as a person. Characters were so human with their flaws. It just brought them to life so much, and that was definitely the highlight of this book. Ever read a historical fiction other than one set in the Tudor era that follows the character's whole life from when, in this case, when they're 5 and 6 years old, all the way to 2022. So we see from the 1950s all the way to the 2020s. That we see how the characters change with the ever-changing world around them. It's a perfect look at slice of life and just seeing what life is like in these different time periods in the last century and then in our time in the 2000s. Writing is why this is not getting a full 5-star review but a 4.5 instead. Don't get me wrong, there were beautiful paragraphs that I would have loved to annotate if I was annotating this book. I will be doing it on a reread. But speaking of reread, I do think this would be way better to pick up on audiobook, and that's what I intend to do when I do reread it. But this was lengthy and long-winded at times. And then some of the formatting, just by the flow of the paragraphs, was really awkward. Passage of time was hard to tell when as the chapters continued to go on. You wouldn't really know what time period you're in until the next chapter. So this could have been edited better, but that being said, I do think it would be better on audiobook, just listening to someone tell you the story, and it is a multi-cast audiobook, so I think that was really good since we are following the life of 2 sisters. Plot is where Mrs. Everything flies, guys, flies right off the page. So many ideas and topics brought off by Weiner, ones including family, race, and religion. My favorite was the themes of feminism throughout the whole 400-page book. That a woman doesn't have to fit inside one perfect little mold, that there are multiple things a woman can be. How the ideas of feminism are different for each woman. Rather it be a housewife in the Northeast or a drifter out in Santa Fe, New Mexico. But at the end, each woman, we are all wanting the same thing, and that is freedom to live life in the way that we want to live life. We shouldn't have to constantly be batting heads with one another. We all want the same thing, and people should just accept that. But obviously with millions of people, everybody's not going to accept things. A utopia is impossible. There are also interesting discussions of how mental and physical health intermingle with one another. The main theme here is life of a woman and how it's never perfect and that we all make mistakes, and some of us choose to learn from the mistakes and some of us don't. In the end, life is lived with its highs and lows, and hopefully it ends up as a beautiful story like this one. I have one more mood read, and that is Lady Sunshine by Amy Mason Doan. This is a historical fiction. Characters, they weren't bad, maybe a bit of Mary Sue's. I did find 2 of the characters to have some toxic vibes, but I don't think that was the intention by the author. The atmosphere was the highlight for me. I really love books centered around an estate or a house, and when the writer makes that house and setting become a character in itself. Every book that I've read with that trope has just been unique in its own way. The transitions between time periods and just chapters flowed really nicely, and it's better than most books. The 3 genres running together here: first, historical fiction, as it does take place between 1979 and 1999. Second, there are hints of romance. I felt like the romantic interest, he just gave me bad vibes. He was very secretive, and I just don't think he was in romance for the right reasons, but we can never really tell for a fact. The third genre we see here is thriller mystery, because we know the summer of 79 ended in a tragedy, and the whole time there's this ominous feeling of what was it that happened. Overall, this did a great job at showing nostalgia and just looking back at summers of the past and just how golden they were. And this gave off the California vibes. Immaculately gives off like yellow and orange vibes. I don't know. I know some people are like that and can see colors, but I know other people aren't. But those are the vibes that it gave off. So the cover is really nice for that. Last book that I finished in August, or at least so far, was Voyager by Diana Gabaldon. So I can't say much as this is a 3rd book in the series. This was a 4 out of 5. I didn't love it as much as the first 2. I did watch the show before reading the book, so the same time period in the show I wasn't a massive fan of. It was my least favorite. So hopefully after this book, the next books go up and back to 5 stars for me. Currently reading Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm absolutely loving it. Seems like it's going to be a 5-star. I'm about 30-something% of the way into it. but stay tuned on my Goodreads, and I will leave Goodreads reviews linked down below in the comments if you guys would like to check them out. But as always, comment, rate, and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that notification bell if you would like to be notified when all my videos go live. If you made it through this whole video, we are going to be doing something new, so if you have watched the whole video, leave me a deer emoji in the comments, so the animal, a deer, D-E-E-R. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye!